Hello, my name's Elisa Grey. Nice to see you all again. If I am seeable and hearable, if you could give me a thumbs up, if anybody's watching, that would be fantastic. Just make sure you can hear me and see me before I start. If you can hear any funny noises in the background, I've got a new pussycat. So he's playing up a bit. He's making some growly noises at the other cats. So yeah, is anyone there? Anne Freeman, can you hear me, Anne? Can you see me, Anne? Yes, awesome. That's fantastic. So yes, I do apologise if you hear a rabid cat in the background growling, because he's on form tonight. He is fighting the other cats. So yeah. Young, robust young man, you see. So, yes, row is what you'll hear a few times. Okay, so tonight's talk is going to be on quite a popular subject. It's been requested a few times over the years, this one, and the Pendle Witches. And so this talk is the Pendle Witches guilty or not guilty? And this is what we're going to sort of ascertain over the course of the next half an hour. Okay, so the Pendle Witches were kind of, well, I suppose, quite unlucky, really. In 1612, there was unrest in Britain, and the gunpowder plot, which was led by Catholic terrorists, had just been discovered. And the Protestant king, King James I, was understandably on edge. Now, we've spoken about King James I before, and his obsession with witches. The author of the book Demonology, he was very sort of interested in witchcraft and believed witches were out to kill him. Anyway, some of the subversive plotters from the gunpowder plot had escaped to Lancashire. And at the time, Lancashire was considered to be a place that was populated by the lowest in society. And that there was sort of subversive people, living in that area. And at this time in history, in Lancashire, lived the Demdike family. And they were a Catholic family of beggars. And they lived at Malkin Tower near Pendle Hill. And there was Granny Demdike, who was a cunning woman, who was paid, she earned a little bit of money healing and harming the people in the area. She was well known as a counsellor and advisor as well. And she lived with her daughter Elizabeth Device and her grandchildren Alison, James and Janet. The story progresses, and Alison was going home one day, up the country lane, and she came upon a peddler who was coming the other way, and she asked him if he would give her some pins, and he didn't want to break a new packet of pins, so he said no. And Alison, very upset by this, cursed the peddler. So he fell to the floor immediately that she cursed him, dropped down, and that was that. And basically, with modern technology and modern science, we sort of think he had a stroke, basically. Now, strokes can be brought on by stress. So either Alison's curse worked, done, he dropped, or the stress of being shouted at and cursed and abused by a young girl, an old fella walking along, could have been just enough, stress-wise, to put him over the edge, and he had a massive stroke. But of course, back then, back in 1612, there was, nobody sort of thought about things like that or knew that. So anyway, Alison believed herself. She believed that she'd done it completely, believed that it was her fault, and she believed that she was a witch. So the peddler's son reported the incident to the magistrate, and the magistrate was Roger Nowell, who was an ambitious Protestant, and he wanted to bring Catholic nonconformists to justice. So Alison confessed to everything and also pointed the finger at the Chattox family. And they were believed to use witchery in their daily lives via the act of cursing and using clay puppets. So accusations of witchcraft were directed at the Demdike family and the Chattox family, and they were both arrested on the 2nd of April in 1612. No one knew that this would please King James. Not only did his commissioned translation of the Bible bear the legends, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live," but he had also written his own volume called Demonology. And this was a mandate for the British to hunt witches. It was basically the king giving his go-ahead to it. So Britain at the time was populated by many enthusiastic Protestants, and fear of the devil was a predominant part of the religion. It took very little to raise superstition, very little at all. So on Good Friday 1612, all devout subjects of the Protestant religion should have been in church, but the Demdikes had a party. And apparently the 22 who attended were witches, plotting to kill a man with the power of their magic and also to blow up Lancashire Castle. Janet Device, Elizabeth's daughter, testified against her mother, sister, brother and neighbours at the age of 9 years old. One of the attendants at a supposed witch's feast was Alice Nutter, who came from a respectable family. The 20 accused languished in Lancaster Castle, imprisoned in what is still called the Witch's Tower, for 4 months. So obviously this changed the law, this trial. Witchcraft was viewed as treason because of King James and King James's view on witches, and therefore the testimony of a 9-year-old was acceptable because it was a treason case. And Thomas Potts, who he took notes through the trial, and he made a book. He released a book from those notes called The Wonderful Discovery of Witches in the County of Lancaster. And he named his patron as Thomas Knivet, who was the man who arrested Guy Fawkes. And that made it so that witches were viewed as terrorists because of that. So by then, in the 1600s, 75% of witch trials ended in acquittal, but that wasn't going to be the case in this one at all. Alison was asked if she could restore the pedlar's health. She cursed him, so could you put his health back? And Alison said, no, I can't, but my grandma can, because Granny was a cunning woman, and obviously the word, witch, as we've talked about, limits somebody to doing just harmful magic. That's what the word means, a woman who does magic for harm. So cunning woman was the woman who could heal as well. But Granny was already dead. She died in the 4 months in prison. Elizabeth Device was described in court as an odorous witch who was branded with a preposterous mark of nature, which was her left eye standing lower than the other, the one looking down, the other looking up. So strongly deformed, of the best that were present did affirm that they had not often seen the like. That did not go in her favour. We've talked about the pretty witch witchcraft doesn't work and she sleeps with you, and the ugly witch who's evil and her magic works. Obviously Elizabeth Device, wasn't particularly easy on the eyes, and so was immediately, that went towards her guilt as well. Janet testified that her mother took the form of a brown dog and that this disguise helped her to kill. She said that her brother could send out his spirit and that he had robbed a graveyard and brought home human teeth that were buried with a clay figure near Malkin Tower, and the teeth and clay puppet were duly found by investigators. Okay, so why? Why did Janet testify against her family? It was this resentment of the family, fear of what she truly believed was witchcraft. Buried teeth in a clay puppet looks a bit, or were they planted there? Was she under pressure from male officials? A little girl being pressurised? Or was she merely distancing herself from the family in order to save herself. You know, what was the reason? Witch trials were usually carried out using the Bible and the classical tome of demonology, but in the trial of the Pendle Witches, it was King James's book alone that was used in court. It was all done to impress the king. It's obvious. You know, Lancaster was suddenly a bed of, you know, a den of iniquity, and the gunpowder plot was connected and all, you know, and King James hated witches and was frightened of witches. And these people wanted to be noticed, you know, the magistrate, the court officials, and they did everything, you know, using King James' book in the court. It was done very much to impress King James I. So yeah, after a 2-day trial, 10 people were sentenced to hang, basically. The presiding judge demanded more evidence when it came to Alice Nutter, because she was more well-to-do. So, you know, obviously, again, you know, if you were more well-to-do, more evidence was required. If you were poor, that's it, you know, you're obviously guilty. The condemned were taken to Gallows Hill and underwent a hanging, which amounted to slow strangulation, each one taking 20 minutes to die, going black in the face and frothing at the mouth, you know. And it's very likely that Janet would be there, you know, watching her mother, sister and brother hang. So, okay, the evidence of Janet Device had a profound impact on the law of the lands. Prior to the Pendle Witch trial, no one under 14 years of age could give evidence in a court of law. They weren't seen as a credible witness. But because of Janet's evidence, children as young as 3 are now able to give evidence in court if there are no other witnesses available. In 1618, the book Country Justice by Dalton cites Thomas Potts' book and Janet's evidence. This book was used in many following witch trials, making it acceptable that children were allowed to testify, and was actually present at the Salem witch trials in 1692. A few years later, in 1633, Janet Device was actually accused of witchcraft when she'd grown up. Edmund Robinson, aged 10, arrived home late, dirty and bedraggled. He said he was walking home when he spied 2 greyhounds. After spotting a hare and the dogs refusing to run, the boy hit them with a stick, presumably to get them moving. One of the hounds turned into a woman, the other a boy. Then the witch turned the boy into a horse and placed Edmund on top of it, and they cantered to Horstones. When they arrived, they entered a barn which was filled with witches, about 60, according to Edmund. There were ropes hanging from the ceiling. The witches pulled them, and the most incredible food rained down upon them. Edmund was terrified about what would happen to him, so he ran away. He added that further on his way, he met a boy with cloven hooves, and they fought, hence his dishevelled appearance. His parents believed the story, and his father took him on a 3-month tour around the local area. Edmund would visit the churches and point out any witches in the congregation that he recognised from his frightening experience. By February, 20 people were arrested and the trial began. He was referred to as the boy that discovered witches, and 20 people were imprisoned, including one Janet Device, accused of killing one of the Nutter family with the power of witchcraft. But King James has recently visited a boy whose testimony resulted in 9 women being hanged, and found him to be a liar. So this made the king become a bit sceptical about witchcraft. The following King Charles I was even more doubtful about the existence of witches, and this of course benefited those accused. 17 people were found guilty of witchcraft based on the testimony of Edmund Robinson, but by 1634 more evidence was requested. One of the main ways of identifying a witch was via the presence of a witch's mark, and several of the accused bore a pap, presumably a skin tag, somewhere on their person. The trial was set in London, and the acclaimed physician William Harvey re-examined the women and found no evidence of evil. So, July 1634, Edmund admitted he'd made the whole thing up to avoid punishment for arriving home all mucky and dishevelled. Also, it was discovered that Edmund's father had been blackmailing local women. Those who didn't pay would be uncovered as a witch. Interestingly, as the trial was taking place in London, a group of players were acting out the story of Edmund Robinson in the play The Witches of Lancashire, while Londoners gawped at the prisoners on display in London jail for the cost of a penny. As the accused couldn't pay for their time in jail, some would no doubt have had to stay, and Janet was still living there in 1636 because she couldn't afford to pay for the lodgings of the jail in order to leave. Okay, so the case of the Pendle Witch Trials is probably the most famous of the British witch trials. I mean, there is the Belvoir Witches, Joan Flowers and the Cat Rutterkin, you know, who Joan was supposed to take the Earl of Rutland's glove and curse him with sympathetic magic. And they put them in a witch hole at Lincoln Castle, which is still there to see to this day. They've covered it up, but you can go and ask to see it. That was pretty bleak. But the Pendle Witches, obviously, we've got the Pendle Witch dolls, haven't we? You know, the big ones that retail for $39.99. You can get Alice Nutter on a broomstick and Elizabeth Device smiling on a broomstick, you know. And I'm not too sure about that myself. You know, I mean, some people, I'm sure they, you know, maybe see it as a nice way to remember the Pendle Witches. But I tend to remember them hanging on the end of a rope with a black face and frothing out the mouth, you know, because they were murdered. But obviously, you know, the Pendle Witch Trials, did it lead to the debunking of witchcraft, you know, as well as the change in the law? Well, it certainly led to a change in the law. And as for the debunking of witchcraft, well, this is the question. They did find the poppet and the teeth. Was that an attempt at harmful magic? Alison Device was happy to throw a curse at the peddler. And Grandmother Demdike was a cunning woman, in essence, a good witch. You know, these distinctions were being made. Physiologically, the peddler's stroke could have been the effects of Alison's curse via the supernatural or the physical, with the stress of their encounter. But the Demdike family certainly believed in witchcraft, as Alison took full blame for it. As attempts had been made to unleash harmful magic, we must assume that witchcraft was at work. Yeah, you know, they were witches. They were doing witchcraft. But the question there is, you know, that is that right? You know, is you know, I've just been sort of thinking about this earlier on. You know, what is the punishment if a witch casts a spell or a curse or whatever, and that works, then surely the universal karmic law has given permission for that to work in the laws of the universe and magic. Is that a punishable offence? Is being strangled slowly to death a good punishment, you know, for cursing the peddler? You know, what do we really think about this? Because if we look at the witch trials and think, oh, they were all innocent, poor people were all innocent, we're really denying that witchcraft works, because some of the people were practicing witchcraft. Not all in the slightest, but some certainly were. So if we're to sort of go, oh no, you know, it was such a shame, and they were all innocent, then do we really? You know, what do we believe in that curses work? Do we really believe? Because if we do, then we've got to entertain the idea, you know, that some of these, you know, that somebody deemed that was punishable. It was a punishable offence. You know, if we're not going to punish it, we're almost saying it doesn't work. There's no way it can work. If we think it works, then does it deserve punishment, or should a witch be viewed as a divine being who's got the right to be judge, jury and executioner? You know, these are the questions. Very, very interesting questions. Ultimately, it was the age of Janet Device that we must question. Does someone of this age really understand the difference between fact and fantasy? As the story went on to inspire Edmund Robinson, it only goes to show how important and influential stories of witchcraft were. With Janet, when she attended the court to give her evidence, her mother screamed at her, and she asked her mother to be removed from the court. And then she climbed upon a table to give her evidence, like a little star, you know, the centre of attention. She would be loving the attention, you know. Power. The fact that Janet was accused of attempting to harm one of the Nutter family through witchcraft is the most interesting. If Janet was so against the use of harmful magic, so against it that she saw her family hang for practising it, then why would she allow herself to be accused of the same thing that condemned her own mother? You know, was it the desire for power, or simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time? Scientific progression did not stop the witch trials overnight, but it certainly brought about change in the conviction rate quickly. More evidence was frequently demanded to prove that someone was a witch. It was the intense Protestant fear of the devil that took the fear of witches to the New World, and as Britain recovered from witch frenzy, America began to experience it. And it's this distinction between the cunning woman and the witch that I'm really curious about. You know, the witch obviously runs synonymous with doing harm, but the title of cunning woman does not. All aspects of healing are encompassed in the term cunning woman, and this then sets the bar for what the witch is incapable of. The witch, the harmful magic user's power, relies on magic linked with the devil, whereas the cunning woman relies on skill and knowledge of nature. If the witch relies on magic to be successful at her art, the art of cursing and killing, then how can anyone actually prove that magic exists? As in the case of the peddler and the fact that his stroke could have been brought about by stress. Debunking the tests used to prove that someone was a witch would be far easier. Pricking became a paid profession, with men going around the witch trials with blunted objects, specifically to prick the accused with and prove that they neither felt pain nor bled where a devil's mark was found. So that became a thing. You could get a job as a pricker. You know, you'd have a blunt thing and obviously you wouldn't feel it. So it's like, oh, they feel no pain, it's the devil's in there. Similarly, the actual witch mark would be refuted by growing medical knowledge and the discovery of dermatitis, warts and skin tags. There's a wonderful old film called Blood on Satan's Claw, and all the kids in this little community get a big brown birthmark. I've got a corker on my left shoulder. It's fantastic, airy thing. And they've got, it's the devil's skin, you know, and the devil comes and he's like, give me my skin. And they all have to cut the skin off and give it to the devil, you know. And I remember, you know, being about 8, you know, and at school, you know, and kids like actually pointing at my birthmark and saying, that's devil's skin on your shoulder. And somebody actually stuck a compass in my birthmark to see if it bled. You know, I was like 8 years old. It's like, well, great, you know. So don't tell me the witch trials are over. So, you know, if Elizabeth Device and her children were actual witches, then they would have to be proficient at making dark magic work, and proving that, even in today's world, will be hard. Be just as hard as disproving it is. If this is purely about intent, then I have no doubt that the intent to harm was there. You know, Alison cursed him. She actually said it. So despite her regrets and everything, she did intend to curse the peddler. And as far as the brother's concerned, robbing a graveyard for human teeth and a puppet, you know, that looks pretty harmful magic. The Pendle Witch trials are extremely important, not just because this trial changed the law, but because there is evidence of some attempts at harmful magic in such a famous witch trial. So yes, it's one where we've really got, it really opens up a massive question, and to me it really sort of puts it into perspective. In the modern world, there is a group of people, you know, who consider themselves to be witches, and some of them I don't actually think they know what the word really means, who aren't actually practising magic. So you've got your altars, people with altars, worshipping a deity, collecting seasonal objects to put on the altar, manifestation, maybe trying to get things that they want, you know, manifestation things, but they're not actually, you know, calling on, practising magic. And then there's witches who are, of which I am one. So if I'm seen practicing magic and my magic is working, I am guilty of witchcraft, right? Okay, if it's not working, I'm nuts. So either way, you know, with this view of witchcraft and looking at the Pendle Witches, oh, if they're guilty, the magic works and they're guilty and the deserved hanging, or the victims, which is it? Which, and why is it only those two categories? You know, is there not something else going on? Should we not be going, oh, the Pendle Witches, maybe the magic did work, maybe we should respect that. You know, maybe they should have been respected because they were actually witches who were using magic successfully. And is hanging the answer? So all these questions, you know, that you look, because I believe that if people, as in the population, believe that magic worked, we'd all be back on the fire. That's what I truly believe. I believe that the population think we're all daft. A bunch of middle-aged women who are talking shit, basically. And if they believed, if for 1 minute they believed, if somebody believed that I could kill them from a distance, which I could, then I'd be on the fire. So this is the question, and it's always been the same, going back over time. The pretty witch who sleeps with Odysseus, the ugly old crone who can kill you, you know, this, whose magic do you believe in? Do you believe in magic? Do you believe in magic at all? You know, and does magic actually work? Did Alison Nutter's curse work? And if it did she deserve to hang? So I will leave you with all those questions. I would love to see some comments up for this one, because it's such a really, you know, a really interesting one, because it really makes us question our own abilities, you know, and there are women out there, you know, I know some women out there who they blow me away, you know, they can do things that are just like, wow, you know, it's amazing, but they can only let the right people, you know, sort of see that, because there's fear, there is fear, because what gives us the right to be able to do that? My goodness, we're not men. Okay. Thank you very, very much. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope that I can do another talk for you in the future until you get fed up with me. Thank you. Bye-bye.